Hello. And welcome to all you PMOs, PMEs, POMOs, POMEs, and PIMQs. Welcome to the world, the podcast where we discuss all things related to the process of waking up, walking out, and moving on from life as a Jehovah's Witness. I'm Dr. Ryan Lee, a former JW with a doctorate in clinical psychology and a practicing therapist, specializing in helping former JWs and other former cult members move through the recovery and rebuilding process. All right, everybody. How you doing? I'm doing all right myself. I apologize for being gone for a few weeks. I took some time off for a little bit of personal development, went on a retreat that was very intense. I can't really even talk about it right now. Maybe in a future episode. But it was just... I went to the retreat and then needed some time after the retreat just to process everything that went on in the retreat. Anyways, since we are on the topic, I'll also just mention that in the coming weeks, my episodes may continue to be a little bit fewer and farther in between. There's a situation at home that I need to attend to that requires being with family. And yeah, again, maybe fodder for a future episode. Anyways, I appreciate your patience and for sticking around. And we have a great show for you today. I love that I'm just treating this like this is the Tonight Show or some shit right now. We've got an excellent show. We've got some musical guests on the panel, and Smash Mouth is here. But yeah, we have a great show for you today. We're going to be talking a little bit about navigating all of the ins and outs of losing your community and trying to rebuild your community and social life from scratch. And this is no small feat. I know I say this all the time, but this is one of the biggest challenges of leaving the organization. I know there's a ton of challenges. They're all big. They're all very big challenges when we leave the organization. But yeah, I'm having a hard time shifting into the gravity of the fact that you lose your entire community all at once in the worst possible way. You know, and I've said this before, and people say this all the time, that this experience, it's like worse than death, because at least death isn't personal, you know? It's just one of the most isolating, awful feelings in the world. It's like being exiled to Siberia or something, except without all the adorable little huskies and just a whole bunch of existential dread. You know, historically, exile was considered worse than death. And there's a reason for that. You know, it's because human beings are wired for connection. Our social ties aren't just about trading casserole recipes or borrowing a ladder. They're the foundation for how we understand ourselves and how we find purpose and meaning and connection and feel like being a part of something. And the JWs know this. I mean, man, do they know it. That's why they dangle the community card like a carrot while holding the shunning stick behind their backs. I can't say for sure, but honestly, given my experience with so many ex-JWs, I would bet at least a third of active JWs probably aren't even true believers. They're just terrified of the alternative of losing their community. This is a large part of the work that I do with ex-JW clients, you know, is related to just grieving this loss of community. And we are going to spend a little bit of time sitting with that today, but we're also going to be covering a range of ideas that will better equip us to face the task of rebuilding our community, which is so important. Of course, it's not so easy to just swap out one community for the next. It doesn't work like that. But don't lose sight of the importance of putting in the work of rebuilding the community. Anyways, I'm already getting preachy. That's what we'll be focusing on today. We're going to talk about rebuilding our community, increasing our capacity for developing more authentic connections, and we're going to start by taking a hard look at the social challenges created by our experience with the JWs. For those who listen to the show, that's generally where I start. Let's just talk about where we came from before we decide where we're going. But then, yeah, from there we'll move on to discussing ways of reshaping our limiting core beliefs about what it means to connect with others. We'll talk a little bit about how to navigate trust issues. And then finally, we'll discuss some useful strategies for developing those social ties and working out some of the kinks in terms of learning how to relate to people. Okay, so let's just start by taking inventory of the fucking hot mess JW's left us with socially. Starting off, obviously, with, how hard it is to put into words how shattering it can feel to lose your entire community all at once. This in itself is something that very few people on this earth ever have to experience. To have an entire community of people who you loved and trusted turn their backs on you. To realize that the intimate bond you thought you had was so easily broken, and that love was anything but unconditional. And then, to feel that shift. They stop treating you like a person and switch to seeing you as some kind of problem that needs to be solved. And then you get that surreal feeling as you hear them recite the same lines that the governing body has drilled into us to use in these situations. And somehow in your head you thought, yeah, but that'll never be me. I'm never going to be on the receiving end of that. And yet, here we are. And it fucking sucks. It's terrible. It's just got to be one of the worst feelings. And the end result is you end up feeling like an alien, not only in the JW world that you're leaving, but also you feel like an alien in the worldly world that you're entering. And part of what makes this transition into the world even more difficult is that you've been counter-prepared to thrive socially in normal society. I think I've mentioned this before, but the word counter-prepared is so appropriate. It's not underprepared, it's counter-prepared. They have infused you with ideas and programming that actually work against you. So first off, we've never been taught how to relate authentically with other people. And everything about being a Jehovah's Witness is about suppressing our authentic desires in favor of conforming with the group and never doing anything to rock the boat. But here's the thing. While it may seem good on paper to interact with the world in a way that is always agreeable and avoids conflict of any sort, in reality, what most people truly crave from others is not someone who just parrots their own views, but has views of their own, Someone with texture and substance. And JWs have counter-prepared us for this. JW conversations are less about authentic connection and more like a rehearsed infomercial. It's nauseatingly predictable. Oh, did you see that Watchtower article on the joys of door knocking or whatever shit? Oh my God, I'm so fascinated. Oh my God, no, I think I'm going to read it again, just in case it didn't sink in. In the real world, spontaneity is what makes connecting enjoyable. Conversations zigzag, they're messy, surprising, and sometimes gloriously awkward. And lack of experience in relating in a more spontaneous way puts us at a bit of a disadvantage when relating to the outside world. In the outside world, there's no agreed-upon script. It's just a confluence of different ideas and ways of being in the world. And there can be just as much, if not more, opportunity for meaning in the conflicts and disagreements as there is in discovering the things we have in common. Which, by the way, is also a challenge for us ex-JWs. Finding commonalities with other people. Most of the outside world has little frame of reference for the actuality of what it's like to be in a cult. And we've been blocked from taking part in so many of the important life experiences shared by the rest of the world. Moving on, tolerance for rejection is another underdeveloped skill for us ex-JWs. JWs live in a bubble where everyone is forced to like each other. I don't know if you can actually force the liking part, but we can act like it. Everybody has to love everybody. But in the real world, rejection is part of the package. People that have more typical, normal upbringings, experience rejection as they grow up and they learn to bounce back. But for us, we're over here like, what do you mean you don't want to be my friend? What did I do wrong? Is it something I did wrong? Why am I so unlovable? Oh, this is a problem. Because most of the time, deep, connection requires us to be vulnerable. In other words, to risk rejection. So this is another skill that we need to develop. And then finally, it's important to name that one of the biggest inhibitors of making new connections in the world is the way in which we've been programmed for years to view non-JWs as sinister and dangerous. We may have intellectually abandoned the JW doctrines, but many people report that they still carry a felt sense of fear in relation to other people. And it's something to the effect of like some vague feeling that because they have not been raised in the truth, quote unquote, on some level that there must be ruthless heathens driven by dark motives. Intellectually, we know that's nonsense, but there's something felt there. It feels ominous. And often, we still carry that core belief that when someone seems particularly nice or caring, that's exactly when we need to be most on guard, because that's how the devil gets you. He's just puppeting everybody, making them seem nice and agreeable and loving, and that's how he gets you. So, to wrap up this section, I've got good news and bad news. The bad news is grieving the loss of your community just fucking sucks, and there's no shortcut through it. You're going to cry, you're going to rage, and you're going to find yourself eating an entire cheesecake in one setting just to cope sometimes. It's fucking brutal. It's raw, and it takes time, and it's well worth doing, but nobody would choose this. It's just what needs to happen in order for you to grieve and move on. But here's the good news. Everything else that we're talking about, the trust, the vulnerability, the rejection resilience, it's all learnable. And once you build authentic connections, you'll wonder why you wasted so much time settling for JW acquaintances who only liked you because they had to. I promise you, it's well worth the journey. Okay, so let's embark on that journey and talk a little bit about reshaping our mindset, starting with trust. Given the discovery that the organization and belief system you devoted most of your life to was a lie, and given that your brain is riddled with ideas about the deep-seated evil pervasive in the world and other people, and then just for dessert, we'll just throw in the idea that you can't trust your treacherous heart, well, shit, man. It's no wonder you have trust issues. Of course. But this trust in yourself and the world around you can be rebuilt, provided you're willing to engage in a process of trial and error. Here's the thing. It would be so nice if I could just tell you that everything Jehovah's Witnesses said about you and the world is all a lie, that you can in fact trust every feeling and instinct you have, and that the world is filled with beautiful, trustworthy people. But of course, that's just not the case. While I absolutely believe that you carry within you a deep inner knowing that can be trusted, a lot of your quote-unquote instincts and gut feelings are extensions of Jehovah's Witness programming, most notably guilt and fear. And while the world is absolutely not the place you've been told it is, and in my experience, the vast majority of people are relatively pure of heart, there are people out there who don't have your best interest in mind. And the only way to better understand the difference between programming and true intuition, between people you can trust and those you can't, is by mindfully engaging in trial and error, with an acceptance that this means sometimes you will get burned. And you get burned in order to teach you which fires are dangerous and which ones will offer warmth. But we get so afraid of the possibility of getting burned again that we end up creating walls, which, sure, they might shield us from pain in some ways, but they also keep us stagnant. They inhibit our growth and keep us from experiencing the beautiful connections that we so deeply crave. And the only way to get there is through a process of trial and error and learning which intuitions and feelings you can trust, which ones come from your higher self, and which ones come from a different place, a programmed bullshit place. And one of the things that can help hone your growth as you move through the world is always questioning what your feelings are about a situation and where it's coming from. So, for example, when you find yourself uneasy when interacting with a person, is it an intuition about this person's actual character? Or is it based on a mental assessment based on the fact that they are covered in tattoos and body piercings and smoking a cigarette? Or if you encounter somebody who's sex positive, maybe even polyamorous, is your resistance that you feel to them based on how that person actually feels to you energetically? Or is it a judgment about what you've been told about the character of a person who has an active sex life? And finally, always keep asking yourself, what am I actually risking in spending time with someone who has a different way of being in the world? Sure, if you're considering bringing this person to your home and/or engaging romantically, then perhaps it's best to err on the side of caution if something feels off. Absolutely, please listen to that, even if it's coming from JW Programming. But if it's only about sharing a few hours of conversation over drinks, I'd encourage you to be curious, explore the possibilities for connection that you might not have expected given your initial assessment. And I promise you, with enough practice, you will begin to recognize the difference between how it feels when your higher self is speaking and when you're operating from a place of fear or unfair judgment. And over time, you'll experience greater clarity and trust in your choices. Speaking of unfair judgment, I like my little segues. Let's talk a little bit about the ways in which we judge ourselves in relation to others. This is another self-created problem when we begin the process of connecting with others. Most of us, pretty much most of us anyways, have a shit self-image after leaving the JWs. We feel strange and awkward, like we have nothing in common with other people, and we think we have nothing to offer that other people would find interesting. And because we've been raised in a performance-based conditional love environment, we think that in order to be worthy of love, we must have a series of accomplishments for other people to admire and applaud. This is fucking bullshit, and it's a shit value to hold yourself to. First of all, when we hold this belief, we can't help but start with a low assessment of ourselves, given the fact that most of us have not had the opportunity to achieve in the areas that society generally applauds. But secondly, and maybe more importantly, maintaining this belief sets us up on another endless hamster wheel, where we're not driven by what lights us up, but rather what we think will evoke praise from others. As we talked about before, the end result is that you get various pats on the head for being something that you're not, instead of the love that you crave for the person you truly are. The truth is, provided you allow yourself to believe it, is you are lovable and interesting just as you are. I promise you, you are so lovable. But here's the catch. You are not lovable and interesting to everyone. In fact, most people are not for you, and you are not for most people. I'm going to repeat that because this is really important and one of the things we overlook coming from an organization that says we should all be for everybody. The reality is most people are not for you, and you are not for most people. For most of us, I would say out of 100 people you meet, maybe 1 or 2 will be for you. And you'll know it. You'll know it immediately when you encounter these people, because all of a sudden it'll feel easy. All of a sudden the words just tumble out. You don't have to think about what to say because the conversation just takes on a life of its own. You all of a sudden feel a familiarity with this person that you just met. They light your heart up, and it's easy. There's no pretense. There's nothing you need to do. It just fucking falls into place, and it's beautiful. But again, that's not most people. Except for the few glowing angels that walk this earth, 99% of us have a few people who love us deeply, a few people who hate us deeply, And then the vast majority will be relatively indifferent to us. And experiencing true connection, which I assume is something you want, requires you to deeply embrace this fact. If we have a mindset that we need to win everybody over, we inevitably will be spreading ourselves way too thin and have to carry more masks than can fit in our duffel bag. You can't win everyone over. You can't, and that's not how it should be. And if you choose that as a metric for success, it'll not only result in certain failure, but a life where you're just confined to wearing the mask you think other people want to see. You end up hiding your true self, and you miss opportunities to connect with people who truly value you for who you are. People that don't require you to wear masks. And let me tell you, there is nothing more gratifying than being around people who you can totally be yourself with, warts and all. And it is so worth finding these relationships, but it does require you to accept that the vast majority, maybe 99%, are not those relationships. And if you're not feeling it, if you're not feeling that joy that I'm talking about, keep moving on to the next one. Accepting that not everyone is for us is also important because it informs how we interpret our interactions. When we have this mindset where we have to win everyone over, then every time a conversation doesn't go how you want it to, or someone we like doesn't like us back, our confirmation bias kicks in. I would assume most of you are familiar with this term, but just in case, confirmation bias is when we hold a certain belief about ourselves or the world, which is then reinforced by us collecting what appears to be evidence in support of that belief. So, for example, in this case, we believe that we are weird or unlovable or awkward. And then anytime a connection doesn't happen, we see that as confirmation of our unlovableness, which then further damages our view of ourselves and increases the odds that we will feel even more inhibited in future encounters. The truth is that when a connection doesn't form, almost all the time, it's nothing about you, it's not personal, it's just evidence that that person is not for you. This person isn't for you. You're not for them. Nothing more, nothing less. You didn't do anything wrong. They were just not for you. On to the next one. Okay, so let's take a second to address this idea that you are an alien in this world, or you feel like an alien. Sure, your experience as a JW was definitely unique. And it's one that most people, they can't totally relate to on an experiential level. But don't fall into the trap of thinking that you're so special, that nobody will ever understand you. As I've developed my craft as a therapist and in creating this podcast, I keep discovering over and over and over again that the challenges we face as ex-JWs are essentially the same ones that everybody struggles with. Now, again, it's worth noting that the degree to which we struggle with these particular things is unique. But all humans struggle with issues of belonging, how to be authentic, how to manage relationships, finding meaning and purpose. Most people come from dysfunctional families, many of who do not speak to each other. They don't even have a religious excuse. They just find some other bullshit reason to cut out family members. And yeah, we're all struggling with how to become better versions of ourselves and how to deal with our vices and our insecurities. This is not unique to ex-Jehovah's Witnesses. We might feel behind in finding our purpose in life in relation to career, let's say. But the truth is, most people feel this way. Even those who are able to go to college, often, so many times, most of the people I went to school with, they didn't focus on something they truly loved. They just did the thing that everybody does, and they just picked a major, and I guess I'll do this. And so many of them ended up in joyless jobs that they're doing just to pay the bills. That's super common. And also, there are countless stories of people who never found their true passion until very late in life. So again, all of this isn't to say that the struggles you face aren't real. They are. They're very real. And we can't skip over the fact that you've been given a certain degree of disadvantage due to your JW experience. But don't make the mistake of thinking that your struggles are so special that nobody else could possibly ever relate. I promise you, you have so much more in common with others than you think. All right, so we are pushing the 30-minute mark on this episode, and I realize there's just so much more to talk about. So, I am going to be back in a week, maybe 2 weeks, depending on how things go with the family. And we're going to cover about 10 different strategies to up your social game. So hang in there. We got lots more to talk about. In the meantime, thanks for stopping by. I hope you found it helpful. If you did, please hit the subscribe button and leave us a review. Or pay it forward by sharing this podcast with other people who might benefit. If you have any questions, feedback, or ideas for future topics, email me at drryanlee@drryanlee.com or visit my website at drryanlee.com. Until next time, remember, you are brave. You are strong. You are so lovable and likable to a very select portion of this population. So go find them. But until you do find them, keep in mind, you, my friend, are not alone.